Everything you ever wanted to know about 45 RPM, but we're afraid to ask. Now, this is an old picture, as you can tell. It's from the 50s. It's my living room where I grew up. These are three of my cousins surrounding my brother. I don't know where I was. I don't know if I took the picture. But, you know, normally you would crop a picture like this. Usually crop a picture like this and get the people in the center, right? But now that would ruin the picture because this is what I wanted to show you. This is the TV that we had as kids, and this is the plug-in attachment that we played records on. And we had a hassock that I would have to jump up on the hassock to reach the thing to put the records on. That's how young I was. Okay. The year is 1939. RCA is having their end of year meetings about profits and so on in sales and engineering. And record sales have been on an upswing for 4 years straight. So it's a good time for selling 78 RPM records these days. And the only sore point is that since these have been around so long, now people want them to be stackable and you play a whole bunch of them instead of getting up every 3 minutes to play one. So all the big companies are trying to make automatic record changes, including RCA. The problem is, it is one of the most unreliable pieces of machinery there is. And so, a challenge is made to the lead engineer, Ben Carson, at RCA, by Thomas Joyce, who's the head of the Home Instruments Division, and he wants him to design a fast-acting, dependable record changer for these 78s. And this is a picture of Ben Carson, and he was responsible for making all the record changes for RCA from the 20s through the 50s, including the gem, the Magic Brain, the one that plays both sides of the record. Actually, if you ever work on those, they're right there. So, in order to appreciate what's going to happen here, you have to understand what you're dealing with. So, the current record design, the 78 RPM, it's been around since the turn of the 20th century. It's a very noisy surface. They're very heavy. If you've ever tried to pick up a stack of like 50 of these, you pull your back out. It's really nasty. There's a lack of standardization. There's sizes from 7-inch to 16-inch. And the most common one, though, is 10-inch and 12-inch. This is the 10-inch I'm carrying here. The 16-inch was only used by studios. 7-inch children would usually have. But they even had other weird sizes. Here's an 8-inch 78 by RCA. I'm sorry, by Victor. So, and another big problem with these is they're very brittle, and anybody who's less than 25 here might be surprised when they see what happens when you drop them. So you got to be very careful with them.
Elvis Presley. They got Enrico Caruso there.
Sun label.
Okay, now, on top of that, they don't stack very well. Now, what do we mean by that? If you really examine the 78 RPM record closely, you'll see that the label is actually recessed so that when two of them are put on top of each other, it's all grooves on grooves, which is bad in two respects. One respect for scratching, and the other, how do you pry them apart when you want to put them on an automatic record changer? So, what they've tried to do is, here's the typical designs. One of them is you have a set of metal blades that are on the edges of the record, and they try to slice in between the first and second record. But because the records are touching each other, it's very difficult it's got to be just right to get that blade in there. And if it's not right, it's going to crack the record. And it happened all the time. The other way they tried to do it was to control it by the center hole. But the center hole is so small, and the record is so heavy, that there's a tremendous amount of stress put on the center hole. So it's not unusual for the holes to wear out or elongate or get bigger as they're used, and then they don't work right, they don't fall right. The two ways of having them fall, one way is, if you ever notice on some old record changes, they'll have the stack of records tilted. What they're doing there is there's I call it a pusher. They'll push the bottom record just a little bit, and that allows it to come down on the center of the spindle. Once again, the problem is with what it does to the hole after a while. The other way is the more common way you see, where the small spindle has a little piece in the center that actually moves, and that allows the bottom record to drop. But also, that's rough on the center hole. So, these are the typical methods they use. There were other methods too. But just to give you a flavor for what they were doing, they were very unreliable, breaking a lot of records. So, here's a response from Benjamin Carson. It can't be done with the current system. If you want a really nice working record and record player, let me start from scratch and do the whole thing on a clean sheet of paper. And let's see, it's 1939. RCA is selling a lot of records. And they're a leader in this field. Go for it. Management says go for it. So Ben Carson and his group go back to their ivory tower and their lab, and they get going. And by the way, RCA made this the only secret project that they kept from the public. As far as I know, still the only one. Is that true, Alex? Do you know?
Well, it's the only commercial project.
Okay. Only commercial secret project. And it had code names like Project X, Madam X, and the X record. That's what they were referred to. And here's the results that they wanted to get out of this. They already knew about vinyl and how much better a record product this could be. Quieter, doesn't break, it's lighter, but it's too expensive. But if you make the record smaller, now you can afford the vinyl. So, with the ultimate size being 7 inches, which isn't true either. They call it a 7-inch record, but it's really 6 and 3/4 inches, which I thought was weird. So, you can make, the record's going to be smaller, lighter, unbreakable, better, less surface noise, easier to handle, and that's an interesting aspect because it's not only easier to handle because it's small, but because of the large hole they put in. Like whenever you try to hold a small record with a small hole, you still have to kind of grab it a certain way, but 45s are real simple to stick your finger through. But that's not the reason they put the hole in there. There was a much better reason. You'll see in a minute. They were designed from the get-go to be stackable and affordable. This is a close-up. I can tell you what it is, otherwise it's kind of scary looking. This is the 45 spindle, real close up, and 3 records are on the spindle. Now, the way they design the record, this real thick part here, that's the label. And then it gets real thin, right, in the center. Also, at the other side of the label, where the grooves are, it also gets thin. Now what does that do? When you put the records on top of each other, only the labels touch. And here you've got lots of space between the records to make it simple for the thing to drop the bottom record. You don't have to squeeze anything through there. There's plenty of room. And on the other side, the grooves are not touching the grooves of the next record. There's air in between. So, the record, and it's funny because I played millions of 45s as a kid and never realized that it was designed with anything like that in mind. But it really was designed to be stackable and to work like this. Now here's another improvement they made. On a 78 RPM record, the closer you get to the center of the spindle, the end of the record, and you start to get a certain type of distortion. Intermodulation, yeah. It only occurs, you only start hearing it really when it's close to the end of the record. So what they did on the 45 is they kept all the music on the area furthest away from the center. So here, now you've got the big hole, you got the big label, and this move-out groove, so it's all near the other edge of the record, which is a good area, so they call that the quality zone. Now, it's not true that it's no distortion, but it's certainly better than the way it was on a 78. Okay, so that was another improvement. All right, so now if you look at what they wanted to get the results for the record player, because it's a smaller record, you can make it smaller. It'll be lighter. It should be simpler to operate because you only have one kind of record to worry about now. 7-inch 45. No more 8-inch, 10-inch, 7-inch. It's all one size, so you don't have to worry about that. They also wanted to make it reject very quickly to the next record. Now the reason for this is because you can only get 5 minutes of music on the side, 3 minutes, whatever it is. If you're listening to classical music, there's going to be breaks. In order to make those breaks less noticeable, they figured if you really whipped that thing through and got the next record down there, it would be better. So that's why one of the requirements was to make it fast. And if you've ever seen the very first designed unit, it is the fastest you'll ever see. Actually, if you're starting to fall asleep and it rejects, it'll wake you up. So, fewer moving parts and economically priced. So, that was the goal. And here it is, 1942 prototype by Ben Carson and his group. And you can see, if you look at the records, they're still experimental because the label is very small area. There's a lot more groove here than they actually decided on later. And actually, I have the patent information on the mechanism, and it's the exact same mechanism that they came out with eventually, except they didn't use this rounded base plate here, and the tone arm is a little different, but otherwise mechanically it's exactly the same, and the spindle is exactly the same. So this is what he came out with in 1942. But what's going on in the world in 1942? We're at war. World War II. The last thing anybody's thinking about is playing records. So now companies are building tanks and communication gear, not radios and entertainment systems. So this thing had to be put on the back burner, understandably. Okay? So, 1942, 1943, 1944, 1945. The war is finally over, and people start buying records again. 78 RPM records. And they're selling them like crazy. Also, during the war, they had captured some magnetic tape recorders from the Germans. So that was going to be introduced as another means of listening to music. Between that and the good sales on the existing records, plus a corporate change in climate at RCA, where you were better off promoting something you already had than something new. And Alex did a terrific job on chapter 2 of my book, where he talks in depth about this, how things changed at RCA. And so for these, at least these 3 reasons, they saw no reason to rock the boat and bring out something new. So they made their money on the 78s, kept this 45 machine on the shelf. 1946, 47, 48. Now, Columbia introduces the long playing record in the summer of 48. And RCA is caught with their pants down now. Yeah, they've got this thing they designed that's a terrific improvement on the 78. But now, here's something that can play a whole symphony with just one turn of a record. And so, it's a whole different ballgame. It's kind of an interesting story on how Sarnoff was invited over to Paley's place there at Columbia. They demonstrated the machine, and it did the new record, and Sarnoff was very upset. He was impressed, and then he was very upset that this little dinky outfit had come up with the LP. And the mighty RCA tried to do it in the 30s, and it was too early to do it. The cartridge designs just couldn't handle it at that time. So now, between that and the fact that Paley was also trying to steal the radio stars that NBC and RCA had, namely Jack Benny, who was the biggest star back then, and he did manage to get him away and over over the Cali. Plus, all of this color television business was going on. Are we going to have mechanical color television or electrical, electronic color television? So Peter Goldmark, who was part of Paley's organization, was pushing for mechanical television, and all these things were happening, and Sarnoff decided, well, if you guys want to be backstabbers, I can be a backstabber too. All right, we're going to go in and we're going to have the war of the speed. We're going to put out the 45 and you're going to have the 33 and people have 78, and here we go. So this was the very first 45 RPM machine. The attachment you would plug in. They put together a package of music to go with it. And one of the sales gimmicks for RCA and the 45 was to have colored vinyl to indicate the different types of music. And I get a kick out of how they say it was great for inventory purposes. But once they're in the sleeves, you can't tell what color it is. I don't see the advantage. It didn't last very long because if you can imagine in a factory, all of this colored vinyl going in different directions, and then we got to change this one now to that color. It must have been a real mess. Plus, colored vinyl, you can see through it, so it has to be pure vinyl, no impurity. Black, you can get away with a lot, right? Because you can't see through it. So that only lasted about a year or two, and then they went black like everybody else. Here's one of their ads toting the colored vinyl. There were 6 different colors, 6 different kinds of music, and there's a great display right here downstairs, if you want to see it later on, that shows all the different color records in an RCA 45 display. So, start production in 1949. Very slow start because people were like, what am I going to do? I don't know what to buy. So sales were dismal. They decide to do an advertising blitz in September, and they cut the price of the attachments in half. They got to the point where they figured, even if we don't make money on the attachments, once they buy them, they can only buy 45s, and we sell them. So that's where the money is. So they also had these package deals, 6 free records with your purchase, and so on and so forth. Anyway, sales picked up dramatically. At one point, it was 50,000 phonographs a month after they started doing this. Here's some of the advertising they did on television. They were doing. Who's David? How can I forget the name of that show? And in the newspapers and magazines, there's a portable unit that you can buy. And notice the great price at the bottom. No, the reason it's 0 is because this was an ad that was being shown to the executives, so they didn't know the price yet. Okay. Now they're starting to sell them like hotcakes, right? So now what does the company have to do? They have to worry about it making enough to keep up with it. So, outsourcing. They go to Oak Industries in India, and who makes record changes, and said, if you can make a 45 only machine and put our name on it, well, we'll pay you X amount of dollars. So they get this agreement going with Oak, And in 1950, they sold these oak machines, the original RCA machine, and then they went back to Ben Carson and said, you know, you did this great job developing this record player in the early 40s. Now it's 1950. Do you think you can do something better now with the materials available today? He comes up with the next generation 45 machine, what uses plastic, less parts, much smoother action, and this is one of the most popular units here with the built-in amplifier. So in 1950, you had a choice of 3 different 45 machines to buy. So RCA was ready for anything. It turns out after 1950, they felt they had too many, and they told Oak, we don't need your changers anymore. So the Oak changers was only available 1 year, and they're much harder to find. Now for the kiddies, they had cartoon machines. This is a picture of a Roy Rogers machine, which you could get for $39.95 back then. Right now, they're one of the most sought-after ones because not only phonograph collectors go after them, but Roy Rogers collectors go after them. Ironically, these are all made out of Bakelite, which at that time you could only get in one color, dark brown. So the cartoon player is painted with lead paint. So all the kiddie players had to have a lead paint advisory on the bottom. Here's a collage of all the cartoon players that they made. And it includes Ding Dong School. This is a Disney player. There's Roy Rogers. And then there's another Disney player that came out with later. Now in the background here, this is a display piece that the dealerships would use to display their children's albums. Now, RCA did another smart thing. He said, all right, let's make this design of a record changer available to anybody, any company who wants to use it.
No charge.
I don't know if it was no charge. It was a licensing fee, but I think it was very minimal. And this is just a subset of the companies that took advantage of it. So many of these phonographs were going out, but with other names on it. And once again, you had to come to RCA to buy the 45s at the beginning. I call them clones, and here's just a smattering of what there was. These are a couple of Capital portables. These are Columbia portables. Now that's ironic, Columbia, because Columbia started making them as well as RCA finally making the LP. Here's a couple more. It's Symphonic was another one. Symphonic used to do some interesting, stylish designs. And the one on the right is a Voice of Music. All right, now this is kind of a special outfit. This one. This is a special attachment that RCA made for their own folks who had bought the very expensive Berkshire high fidelity system. In 1948, they were selling these big consoles for $4,000 to rich people, and they were getting 78 RPM changers. Now the next year they come out with the 45s. So they said, well, let's make a real special one for these rich folks and sell some of those. So this is a really nice cabinet with the brass stuff on it. And this is the inside. You can't see it very well because it's all black, which is a color scheme they never used anywhere else. But the other things about this is the only 45 machine that used a magnetic cartridge. Back then, I think it was just GE had them out, and it had a special motor that would not induce hum into the magnetic pickup. So they did a lot of extra things with this one, and they didn't sell very many, so this was pretty unusual. I've seen 3 of them in about 8 years, and that includes looking on eBay. So they're pretty rare. And one of them was actually blonde, so they did have a couple of different color combinations. Okay, so with this all-out war, where we have LP, we have 45, finally, all the companies started to realize that both of these records are selling. We got people who, classical music people, they want the LP, there's no doubt about that. Then you've got the jukebox manufacturers who have these 78 RPM mechanical nightmare machines that they want to upgrade to 45. The LP does nothing for them. So they're pushing for the 45 to be successful. And then you've got popular music, the Billboard Top 100. And it was just a natural that would go on at 45. And then when that became rock and roll and all the teenagers with money in their pockets, it became a really big place to make money. So both speeds were successful. RCA was the last holdout, but they finally agreed to make LPs. That brings us back to the beginning again. 1939. What were we trying to do? We're trying to make a record changer that would be simple and be the next step, right? To be an improvement. And now what do we have? Now we got 3 different speeds, 2 different spindle sizes, 3 different record sizes. So, forget it. Now we have to have a complicated multi-speed changer. So all of the manufacturers of record changers have had to come out with that, including RCA. And so what does that do to RCA's sales of 45 machines? They have to come out with innovative ways to try to sell them. So in 55, they came out with the slider-matic, they call it. This is where you take a 45 and you slide it, you shove it in that little slot there, plays the record, and then it spits a second. Sounds interesting until you do it about 5 times and then you're tired of it. So this was not a good seller at all. They sold them as attachments and with radios. These 2 have radios. These are pretty unusual. But this was a flop. Now, in the early 50s, Bakelite was the thing. This one on the left here was very popular. Art Deco, even now, they're very popular. But then when it came out with these bright plastics in the middle 50s, everybody started buying those, and the sales of these Bakelite ones went down in the tubes. So there was a big changeover in 55 that many more bright plastics were sold than the Bakelites. Now the other thing they came out with, and this was a good thing, was new orthophonic high fidelity. They finally started putting together in nice packages a wooden cabinet, woofer and tweeter, push-pull amplifier, and a much better cartridge, and these things sound pretty damn good. By the way, everybody wanted mahogany back then. And that one on the left is my original mahogany from 1958. The other two are very hard to find around here. The one in the middle is maple. I got that from a guy in California. And the one on the right, the oak, I got from a guy in Michigan. They did have some Bakelite units that had an 8-inch speaker that also sound good. But these have the tweeter. So these are the best sounding in my view. So this is in '56. This is what they came out. That this was their last hurrah to try to keep people buying these over the multi-speed units. Now, so what would have been next? Stereo was coming out in '57. They actually did come out with a few stereo 45s, but that didn't last. Stereo 45 players, RCA never made one, but a couple of other companies did. RCA never made them, and then there was a big factory fire, 1958, at the Chicago plant of the Crescent Corporation. Instead of rebuilding, they sold any tooling that they could to Westinghouse. Westinghouse continued making them in 1959, and that was it. Then they stopped, and that was the end of the 45 machine. The changer, right. Obviously the 45 went on many, many, many years, and even today I can buy them new. But that brings us to the conclusion. With all of this engineering and marketing, all of this stuff over all of those years, how is it that the two new speeds equals the old speed? I'll leave you with that. Any questions?
What's the of the 45 players? What is the most collectible value?
There's a few that are most collectible. Roy Rogers is one. Berkshire is another. The cartoon players are collectible, but not as much as the Roy Rogers. Now, there's also a thing called a demonstrator, which was only given to dealers. And when you wanted to buy a record, they would play it for you on the demonstrator. That unit is worth a lot of money.
Was it metal or?
No, it looked like the orthophonic high fidelity one, but bigger. And it had both a 33 RPM changer and a 45 changer on it. And an interesting little thing they did there is they finagled with the inputs to make the 45 changer sound better than the 33.
Some things never change.
They also had automobile attachments.
Oh yeah. RCA came out with a automobile model that you mounted under your dash. And that's an interesting machine because it's completely reversed from what you see here. That machine is mounted upside down, and the records are played upside down. And then when it rejects, the tone arm moves out of the way and drops the record that played into a storage area, and then plays the next record. Those are worth money. And,